Hi, Kelly, and everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Goatless Yoga podcast. We've been pretty consistent over the last few weeks recording these things, and hope everyone's doing well. And Kelly, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just finished practice. Still a sweaty mess, but we show up as we are,
And that
and
and
I'm
that's
excited.
that's right, and that's what leads me into a topic I was thinking about. Is I've been traveling a bit lately, and actually for the last 5 weeks. This is my first full week back here in New Jersey, and I think we could start to talk about how to stay consistent in your practice while no matter what, no matter where you are or what you're doing. And I think we both think about this the same way.
Hmm.
I was in Virginia, and I worked in 8 or 9 hour day. And after a day or two, I was missing my practice and decided to search out some studios in the area, which I found a few, and um, took a few classes in them, and I'm glad I did. And it allowed me to stay consistent, and stay grounded, and stay keep progressing in my wellness and what I was working on. And by you doing your practice right before this podcast, I mean, I'm assuming you feel the same way about consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. Something, and I'll probably say it multiple times as you tune into this podcast with us, that if I can stand up, I show up. And I think I said it before, I've modified it to if I have consciousness, I can show up. So it really doesn't matter what's going on. We can do some sort of practice toward our well being, whether that's a physical, mental, breathing practice, even sometimes just grabbing a book and reading a book. That's a practice. So I think, yeah, consistency is key. Like,
I agree with that, and I did that at the beginning of the trip, and Mondays and Tuesdays I did bring some reading material and did my own routine in my room, but I was seeking a little more, and I had the time, and it's one of the things that's interesting about doing that, and it's not the first time I've done that. I do that a lot when I travel. Since I've gotten involved with yoga, and I recommend it to anyone who is into it. And everyone has their favorite studio and their favorite instructor and their favorite style, but it's nice to get out there, and sometimes refreshing, and to see different flavors and different and how it's done in different regions of the country. In this
yeah,
particular region in Virginia or Norfolk area, they were into a hot yoga studio, so most of the classes were geared around a hot studio, and it was a vinyasa or whatever it might have been. It was all the two studios I visited were hot. So it's refreshing to see how different parts of the country practice.
yeah. And just for our listeners, your normal practice, is it usually heated?
No, it's not. My normal practice would be a vinyasa flow type practice, non-heated.
Mm-hmm.
I think we said it in one of the pod. If you're doing it right, you're gonna get heated anyway, and you're gonna get a nice sweat in, a nice sweat going. But it's not heated usually. I do teach a hot yoga class. I'm a fan of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not go out and search for it. It was just what was available, and that's kind of what this theme of this podcast is. Um, that was where I was, that was available, and I took a shot at it. And I'm glad I did. I went multiple times after that once I got to see how it was run, and it was run pretty good. And they had a nice business, and it was refreshing.
That's awesome. Like, well, there's no studios in my immediate vicinity. I have to travel about 40 minutes to the closest studios. And so I mostly practice alone and in my room here, where you see. And so when I travel, that's one of the things that I really love is to find a yoga studio or two and to take classes in a group setting with a teacher in the room. Whether or not I receive adjustments, that, it doesn't matter, but there's just something to that experience. And one of the things that I encourage as a teacher to the folks in my class is if you do have the opportunity to take class with another teacher, you should. because you never know. They may say something a little bit differently, or they may quote something that you've never heard before, or they may give you an adjustment you've never had, and it change your entire practice. It can be really easy to fall into this rote kind of routine, but one of the things about having to think outside of the box and staying consistent is that it can reveal more of you to yourself.
One of the things I like about it is that, being a teacher for a little while, and you kind of get away from your own practice during those times when you have to teach others, is
Mm-hmm.
that you get back to, being the student, and getting guided through it, and kind of exploring yourself, like you're saying, a little bit more, a little bit deeper into that, and differently. These, even I have taken and taught hot yoga classes. These particular classes were very hot, and they were allowed me to explore a little more, and get deeper into certain postures, but also, along with the guidance, realizing that you have to kind of take it easy as you're coming out of there, to prevent some injury when you kind of tighten up. It was still early spring when I was there, so now you're in a very hot class, and you're completely sweated up and ready to go, back to your room, or whatever. And I just had to make sure I took it a little easy coming out of there, because I was like, this could be a little dangerous, as far as, injury or pulling something when you start to cool down.
Right.
So I kind of, I enjoyed that experience as well. It kind of monitoring myself as I'm not only practicing, but even afterwards, kind of restoring back, getting back to normal, and drinking some water, and, you know, leaving the place.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about taking it back to being a student. One of the things that just as my personal a principle for myself is that if I am not practicing, I should not teach. So I value and will prioritize the consistency in my practice for that reason. Um, for other reasons, but especially while teaching for that reason. And another thing that you said is like being the student of a teacher. So a lot of folks may say, well, you're practicing there in your room alone. I actually choose video classes to do. I rarely ever just put on music and flow myself. I know some people really do that, and probably some people think that I should probably do that. But for me, I really like not having to be in my head when I practice, not having to think, well, what do I do next? And yeah, you feel it through your body and all this and that. But going through another teacher's sequence also helps me, again, be outside of the box, and it challenges me in a way that I may not have even thought to challenge myself. And I like that. I like that aspect. I do. I have to admit, I enjoy being challenged in my
Well,
practice.
when I started to practice on my own outside of a studio, I thought I got to a certain place where I didn't need it really anymore. I didn't have to. Maybe I was trying to save some money. I don't remember exactly the mindset I was in when I tried, but I don't. It might just be me, but I have a bad habit of rushing through the practice. So I would set aside an hour or an hour and a half to do this thing, and then 40 minutes in, I'm like, did I just do the whole thing? So sometimes I would go back to a YouTube video, or someone I knew, or somebody who I maybe had purchased a recording, or purchased something from an instructor along the way, and I would go back to it and say, okay, I got to slow down a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm flying through this um, portion of this for some reason. I guess because I just wanted to get it over with and get into the meat of it, and I shouldn't have been doing that. So I learned something about myself. That's true to this day. I like to do a faster sequencing and dynamic flows, but I'm getting better at slowing myself down, and just taking my time through it, and actually doing the best I can with that. But it's another reason why I recommend taking some studio classes, even if you are a teacher or someone who's pretty advanced. It does bring you back to being that student and learning about more about yourself and others, and different, like you said, different sequences, and um, different classes, and how other teachers see it. You could do the same postures, but in a different way or a different speed, and it's a totally different practice.
Right. Well, let me ask you, when you're traveling, how do you go about choosing the studio that you visit and the class you attend?
That's a great question. The first one would be how close it is, and if I can walk, or if I have to get a taxi or a car or an Uber ride to it. And there's a few apps that I use. The main one is, I guess I can name it, Mind Body app. I go on there and I put in the location where I am, and it will pull up, the filter it to the closest one there, and it comes up with usually two or three or four, or depending on the city, or five. And I kind of start reviewing the class titles, and picking one out that seems to interest me.
And what do you look for in a class title?
Well, we've talked about this before, but
Yeah.
I actually look for as much detail as possible, and something that is genuine and something that is unique, because you can kind of tell after doing it a while, like, who's just copying and pasting some description of something and putting it in there. Because I like to know about what I'm going to get, and one of the things, if it was a hot, what temperature it's at, and what kind of flow it might be, or what type of style it might be. So, and I think that app does a pretty good job of giving you that description. So first would be distance, time. I would want an hour. I try to stay away from the 45 minutes. I just don't think that's enough for me. So I always try to go for an hour, hour and 15, hour and a half class. And then a good description of what it might be. So, yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it too.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, foolproof, really, for most people, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and of course, the time of day it would be too. I mean, I think I took one morning, and the rest were after I finished my work day, and before bed. So that would be important, to know. And to be honest, a lot of the classes were full. And where I had to look for the second one. That's why I looked for the second one originally, because the class I had taken the first time was full and waitlisted. So the app, that MindBuddy app, works pretty good for that and to find the class. So
Yeah, that's good. I don't have Mind Body, so when I do it, I'm just using Google and just kind of looking around, So I look at their websites and I look at their schedules and I compare and see, of course, times and descriptions and all of those things that way. But I can't see unless when I go to sign up for the class, it tells me I can't. I can't see if it's waitlisted or anything like that. But I've actually not ran into that problem, not having a space. So, but that is something to be aware of because I do know that happens.
well, one of the good things about an app, I mean, I'm just using mine. I don't know if there's any other ones that exist. There used to
Yeah,
be
there.
a Schedule City. I remember that one. There was two of them because I had both of them. And one of the good things about MindBody is that a lot of times there's discounts if you sign up through the app. I guess they work that out with the studio, and also you have a credit card or a card associated with it, so you pay right there. It's kind of you already paid, and I think, well, one of them had a special where I paid I think I paid $30 for the month, so I was there longer than a month, and to me it was well worth it. So that's another good thing about finding it on an app. You can get the best deal, best bang for your buck. So I have no problem with that. Or you know, don't have to carry cash around, or your wallet. You could just go in your yoga clothes and get to the studio and practice and worry about that. Everything else has been taken care of.
Yeah, that's good. Uh, One of the things that I think a lot of folks struggle with, and everyone, I think, at some point in time probably runs into this issue, some of us more than others. But when our life has little bumps in it, like some of us deal with chronic conditions that affect us physically. And sometimes we'll be, up and raring to go, and other times not so much. Or if something particularly stressful is happening, or you wake up with a cold, it's allergy season. I know some people deal with seasonal allergies, things like that seem to throw people off. Like they'll say, okay, I've got to wait until I recover from this, whatever it is, this issue, or there's just too much stress, or I'm just too busy right now. And then they never come back to the practice after that. When you face those moments, I know you were busy in Virginia, but when you face those moments, when you're not maybe 100%, or there's other things filling your mind, how do you keep consistent then?
Well, I think we talked about this before, and one of them, I did have an injury. I had a back injury. I would guess I'm going to say recently. It was in 2025. I don't remember if it was December or January or even into February, and I just modified the practice. I still was consistent, and that's one of the things we're talking about in this theme is you actually gave me a few postures to try and to open up and keep everything opened, heart openers to help the lower back. So I did practice. I might not have practiced for 90 minutes, but I consistently, on the days that I had assigned practice, and before the injury I still practiced. So I think I might have did a little bit of lower weight in the weightlifting part, and I still practiced, and if it wasn't an hour, it was close to it, or about 45, 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I couldn't do certain things. I passed on. I didn't do a chair. I didn't do certain postures that were putting a lot of pressure on my injury.
Mm-hmm.
So I modified from there, and I'm glad I did, because I came out stronger than I was.
Right.
And more mindful of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think I came out of a couple of months of really going at it, going after it, and it caught up with me. I pulled something. I don't know where, but I did, and I would recommend that for everyone too. Stay consistent in what you're doing. Keep moving,
Mm-hmm.
working yourself out as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Under, of course, a doctor's guidance or recommendations, but don't just stop.
Yeah.
That's probably the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, I think the important thing to realize too is you can always train around an injury as well. For example, if your back hurts, maybe if it's the low back, maybe you're training a little more upper body. Maybe you're doing bicep curls. Maybe you're going for a walk if that doesn't aggravate it too much.
Exactly.
There are a lot of different options. You don't have to completely stop most of the time. But I'm curious, you work full time as well as teach yoga, and I work and building my career and business and things that we're working on, projects. We're both very, very busy people. And I'm wondering, in order to keep this consistency, what does priority look like to you? Like, are there times when you have to give up other things in order to make sure that you practice?
Absolutely. Um, I think we talked about that too. You prioritize a few things in an order,
Mm-hmm.
um, um, and you choose them accordingly. But practice is always pretty high on the list, and wellness. I'll put it that way. Wellness is high on the list. If that's a walk one day, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, if there's a holiday or a family function or something you have to go to, or maybe something happens where you can't get to it will drop off for a day, hopefully only a day, and I'll be right back into it as soon as possible. It's not like I do a double the next day. I'll just, start again.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like again, I think the theme there is just not falling off, the wagon, I guess.
But that's why I was bringing up in travel, because we're getting ready. We're getting ready in April. Whenever someone's looking at this, months from now, it's the springtime now that we're talking, and people are getting ready for vacations and
Mhm.
family trips, and there's no reason why you have to stop.
Mhm.
Uh, we're I mentioned an app you can use, or just a Google that you can use. You can find the studio, or some play, or even a YouTube, or something that might be up there for free even, and you can continue with your practice. And if it comes to a point of vacation where you can't step away, you can't get away from family, then you can just get right back on the next day. Uh, so and it's actually a lot of fun. So you never know. You might love something that's outside of your vacation spot or along the way. It might be something to add, and maybe to take your whole family to, or to share with others. And you never know what you find.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I mean, here in the Northeast, I'm in New Jersey. It's there's a lot of studios, so I have a lot of options, and I'm grateful for that. I also go to the gym, which has a complete yoga program there, which is included in gym membership. So I'm pretty lucky with that here. So when I do go on the road, which comes up from time to time, I actually enjoy looking it up, and it's like a little kind of hobby to do when I'm on the road, and to find something really cool.
Mhm.
So far, everyone I went to has been pretty good. So
Great.
yeah,
Can't complain there.
yeah.
Absolutely. Um, so another thing that we've been talking about is authenticity. And I think this is a good moment to bring that up as we can talk about consistency in terms of logistics, but when we talk about consistency alongside authenticity, I was talking to some folks last night after class, and I told them that it can be really easy seeing someone with a consistent practice that looks to be pretty fit and think, well, that's just them. It comes easy for them. Or they've always done that. Or they were born athletic. All of these things. When 99.9, and that's cliche, but from what I found, that's pretty true, of the time, that's not the case. That person is there, and I think we talked about this when we were talking about discipline, to work on something. And it might not even be their physical health that they're working on. They might be there purely for stress relief, you know. So when it comes to authenticity, what do you think of in terms of yourself in that?
Well, I always try to be, and I think I carry myself a certain way that I am authentic and genuine in what I do as far as the practice. Um, because there's a lot of things going on out there, especially in social media and other circles in the yoga world, that aren't authentic. Um, and what I would like everyone to know is that, those are just to manipulate you and to kind of keep you down, almost like like you'll never be able to do this, or you'll never be able to get to this level because I'm somehow born with this, or um, I have an athletic body, or the things you just named a few minutes ago. But you know you're enough. You are enough, and no matter what level you're on, or stage, or how old you are, doesn't matter in your practice. If you bring your authentic self, your unique self, you're free to enjoy this life. And I hope that makes sense, because it's deep stuff, but it is authentic. And I much rather see someone come to a yoga class of mine who is out of shape and struggling, but is showing up consistently, than someone who can come in and you know, hop right into a handstand and walk on their hands around the room, who's been trained in some kind of other physical activity along the way. Because the person who's overweight and might have an injury, or they're coming with their authentic self. They're coming to practice for real. They're taking it seriously. They're trying to be disciplined, like I was and still am, to get something out of it. It's not to just show off or to demo a posture. It's to learn and to explore themselves and look for answers into how to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Not just at yoga, but in themselves.
Right.
Totally. So that was kind of a long answer, but you know, just came out. So I hope it makes sense when you listen to it later.
No, that's exactly the kind of answer that that question deserves. You know, I one of the things that I also say a lot in my classes, and this is the truth, is one, to watch how you talk to yourself. You know, one of the things that they are finding is that our cells and our body continue to have signs of life or whatever long after we've passed away. Our body is a living entity on its own, which is what that says. But I tell folks, we have also, and if we want to think about brain science or whatever, we have that primal brain too. And bodies, and this is weird, but this is a good way to think about it, I think, will respond kind of like a dog. If you talk ugly to yourself all the time and talk ugly about your body all the time, it's going to bite you back. It's not going to perform. It's not going to be able to. But if you talk to it nicely, tell it good job, thank it sometimes, give it a treat, feed it well, let it rest. It's going to adapt and it's going to work for you. I also think of that science experiment that I saw in a video somewhere about the kids at a school where they had two plants. And one of the plants they bullied and called it names. And then the other plant, they talked nicely to it and treated it well. Well, of course, the plant that was bullied wilted and didn't grow well. And the plant that they spoke well to thrived.
Yeah, it probably thrived and bloomed, and that's the point.
Yeah, it's a vibration. So I tell my students, like, watch how you're talking to yourself when you practice. And then another thing is we have to accept the place where we are, or we will not get where we are going. It's the body that we are in and the place that we are that gets us to where we're going. And we have to accept what we have to work with, what is actually there, and be grateful that we're starting from somewhere. And I know sometimes gratitude can be cliche and almost seem silly sometimes, but thinking of it like that, like taking a moment to acknowledge, yes, I am grateful. I think we overlook it quite a lot, where I think most normal people are grateful for things. Normal, whatever that means. I'm not normal. But so accepting where we are allows us to fully be present in that state, which in turn allows us to understand it better and then work to change the aspects of it that we actually desire to change. And that self-acceptance is important. It doesn't mean that you have to stay there or that you can't change it or shouldn't change it. It's just accepting that you're there. We all start somewhere. You know, a lot of folks, I tell them, like I told them last night, you know, when I started this journey, at various times I was in a much bigger body. You know,
So
at my biggest, I was 240 pounds. You know, and I'm not saying that someone at 240 pounds can't be fit, because you better believe I could hike to the top of the mountain just like I can right now when I weighed that much. But it was in other ways that weight did not feel like it was my body. I felt like I was in a someone else's body, or an imposter body, because it didn't reflect my spirit. So there was some kind of disconnect, something was off, and there actually was. And when I took time to really, I mean, it took trial and error, trial and error. But when I took the time to actually say, okay, here we are, we've got something to work with, we're alive, we're breathing, we can read and research and work on this.
can I
When
ask you
I
a question?
accepted that place,
Can I ask you a question about that?
yeah.
How long did it take you to take the weight off?
Once I figured out some of the reasons that I was holding on to weight, not terribly long. Um, but I tend to, when I make a decision about something, I tend to be all in on it.
Me too.
You know, like it's either do it or don't.
Well, that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking, because similar, I weighed a lot more too, and it took me like 6 months, and I was like, wow, that's all it took, you know, because I was thinking, you know, leading up to that point where I made that decision to kind of go on a health journey, even before yoga, that it was going to take years, but it didn't. Um, so I think that's what you're kind of saying with, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry about
Mhm.
that. But I think that's what you're kind of saying is accept where you are. So I guess that's what I had to do first. Accept I am here now, but tomorrow I'm going to be in a different place. And that was all I really needed,
Yeah.
to move forward in that direction. Did you feel that or no?
Yes. Yeah, that's all I really needed. Like, to accept that I do have something to work with. You know, and as long as I have something to work with and I want to be alive, then I'm going to go after it,
Yeah.
because there's no reason not to.
Yeah, you almost,
And that was what I had to work with. And once I got some things figured out, again, there was a lot of trial and error. The weight came off, but I want to also say that weight is not the definer of well-being.
no, for, not.
So, like, I'll say too, like, even after the weight came off, my body has changed tremendously since then. I'm in a much healthier body today than I was even 5 years ago. You know, and I've kept the weight off now for around 13, 14 years. You
Yep.
know, completely. I would go up and down a little bit before that. But even then, I'm able to do what's called body recomposition, but also work on other aspects of my health
Hmm.
because of the freedom that being more comfortable with my body is given.
Yeah, yeah. Same. Yeah, I had the same experience.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, like last episode, we talked about when someone asks you how you're doing and you say terrific, you know, and that, yes. But there are times, like we mentioned earlier in this podcast, where, you know, everyone without exception, sometimes gets a little stressed out or feels like gets a cold or feels a little bit not 100%. And yes, there's still a reason to be terrific and answer that question that way. But are there ever times like that when you feel like you don't want to show up for your practice? Or do you almost always at this point feel like you do?
Not anymore. I mean, I've kind of made a decision, almost like, I don't know if I should say it, but like, death is not an option, so, um, because of, the energy in the body and all of that stuff, which I was going to get into before, but, we got on a roll. Not anymore. Of course I get colds. Of course I get, um, the sniffles. Of course I get depressed. Of course I get, emotional. But for the most part, I kind of committed to finding the good during the day and go for it, and go for that. The same way I would find the good in people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. There was a this is why we have to make these things longer, because now I'm getting into it, right?
Yeah.
Like there was a friend of mine's mom comes to mind when I'm telling the story. I'll say it, and boys will be boys, right? So we would go out, and who would drink and who would steal something, and who would little things, but nothing crazy, um, and who would get in trouble and get into a fight and use bad language. But maybe on a Sunday they would cut her grass. That's how she remembered them. you know
Mm-hmm.
she would say, oh, yeah, Johnny was a good boy, he cut my grass. She knew all the things that Johnny did. She knew Johnny might not have been the nicest guy in the world and kind of got himself in trouble, maybe even got it, had the law, pick him up one day. But she deliberately did that. And I didn't realize that till years later, that she was acknowledging their good and never their bad. She did not want to give the attention to someone who might have stole a bike.
Hmm.
She wanted to say, I appreciate you cutting my lawn. She didn't scold him for the bike, but she didn't even mention it. It took me a very long time to realize that she was doing that on purpose. That was her way of kind of saying, and probably changed these kids' lives for that reason. Because if someone else would have always given the attention of the bad things and they were an attention seeker, maybe they would have done more bad things. In this way, they would do more good things. And whether that was carrying her groceries, they just were being nice to her because she was the mom or the grandmom of our friends. But she made a difference, and I think about her a lot. So the question was, yes, I get all the emotions a normal human being would, but I concentrate more on the good ones and the happy feelings, because I think at the end of the day, they outweigh the bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something to be grateful for and something to be happy about. So,
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of brilliant of her, really.
yeah,
Because we've all heard that term, and I'm not going to get it exactly right. But where your mind goes, the energy flows.
yeah,
So if we want to put energy toward our well being, and this is another thing I also say often in class, is joy is there all the time. All the time. All we have to do is choose to notice.
right,
Choose to notice. It could be, for me today, the sun is out. That is wonderful. For me today, I did 100 pounds on my hip thrusts, here at the house without a dumbbell or without a barbell. So that gave me joy. All of these little things that bring us joy, even when, there are the other things. And our brain, just the way that it's designed, wants to problem solve. So it'll focus on those things that are tough. But we can see that, we can acknowledge that and do as you just illustrated and say, okay, but also this.
correct.
It's not ignoring
No,
issues. It's just saying, but also this. but
Right.
also this. And choosing to give that good feeling, that joyful part, the what is going right, some acknowledgement.
Yep.
And I think for the both of us, I show up regardless of how I feel. Um, Most of the time, there's not a time when I say I don't want to practice. Most of the time, it's like I want to practice.
Yeah.
At this point, and I think that maybe for both of us is part of the reason. Is the joy of
Well, right.
that.
It's
Hmm.
how we started to talk about it this episode, and is that, you know, going on a trip and seeking it out. So maybe I was seeking out joy. Maybe I wasn't seeking out a practice. Maybe I was seeking out the joy that it creates.
And joy is a practice. That's. I think that might be a good place to end.
I think
Joy
so.
is a practice,
Joy is a practice. Life is a service.
and consistency is key. If we want to go on that roll.
There. I mean, I don't think there's another. There's a. That's probably the best spot to end it. I mean, that was great. Um,
Yeah. So we'll have episode, wow, 5. That's a good number.
next,
Episode 5 coming your way next week, possibly, and some other announcements. But for those of you who have been tuning in to this new little podcast, just want to say thank you. Thank you very much. And we appreciate you.
we do, and we appreciate comments and any help you might need. Don't hesitate to write to us, and we'll get back to every last one of you guys. And we
Yeah.
appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah. And until next time, we'll see you. See you, Shawn.
Have a great rest of your day, Kelly. See you in the next Goatless Yoga podcast.
Thank
Have,
you.
have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.